Man, I'm beat today. Yawn. In the crowded train during the morning rush hour, I let out a big yawn. Right now, I'm working at a bar until the wee hours of the morning. Until last month, I was working as a salesperson at a food manufacturing company. I worked diligently for 20 years. I was a veteran employee. In my job, I had a good client base and my sales performance wasn't bad. In the past, I even won a CEO's award and was promoted year after year. The shadow cast over my otherwise smooth sailing career began with an incident this spring. It all started when our parent company was caught cutting corners in the product manufacturing process, creating a big scandal. My company, caught in the fallout, cites financial situation worsened. Higher-paid managers were encouraged to take early retirement, and I ended up being indirectly laid off in a roundabout way. The severance pay was meager, and unemployment benefits alone weren't enough to cover living expenses. I didn't have kids, so there was no child support to worry about, but I was paying for not only the house and car loans but also the care expenses for my dad, who was ill and in a facility. I needed to find a job as soon as possible. Any job would do, as long as it provided a stable income. The day after I was told about the layoff, I heard that a longtime employee had quit the bar I always visited after work, so I immediately asked for a job. Working nights came with a decent pay bump. I started working at the bar right after leaving the company. Working late hours is pretty tough, but I've gotten used to it. Tired from work, I rang my home's doorbell. Usually, my wife, Linda, would open the door right away, but this time she didn't come out. What's going on? I used my key to open the door. I'm home. Linda was sitting at the dining table chair. Despite it being morning, the curtains were still drawn, and the room was pitch dark. Sensing the bizarre situation, I called out to her while looking at her back. "Hey, is something wrong?" Then she turned around to face me. "Please, let's get a divorce." She muttered just that and bowed her head. What's going on all of a sudden? I've fallen for someone else, that's why. No matter how much I asked for a reason, she insisted on getting a divorce because she had fallen for someone else. I couldn't comprehend what had happened so suddenly, and I was at a loss for words. Linda and I had been married for 4 years. We were originally from the same hometown and high school classmates, reuniting at a class reunion. Both of us had moved to the city and found out we worked nearby, so we started going out for meals after work. Our relationship quickly developed, and it didn't take long before we decided to get married. After getting married, I didn't want to overburden her, so I asked her to quit her job and become a housewife. Since we married later in life, we hadn't planned on having kids. Linda had worked to her limits and didn't seem to have the energy for child-rearing. We always talked things through and shared our feelings, and I was content thinking we were a happy couple. But that was all my assumption. Who was this person she had fallen for? Since when had she been interested in this person? Or were they already close? I had a ton of questions I wanted to ask. Just give me some time alone, please. In the silent room, I reflected on what my wife had told me. I didn't think I was such a terrible husband to be handed a divorce. I wasn't a drinker, nor did I gamble. I didn't have a history of messing around with other women. I thought I had always been kind to my wife. Thought I had. Since we got married, I had always been busy with work, coming home late every day, and spending weekends just sleeping due to exhaustion, hardly ever finding time to talk. Then I got laid off and started working nights. It had been a long time since we last enjoyed time together. Maybe my wife felt lonely being alone. We never even had time to talk about it. It wouldn't be strange if she found someone else who had what I lacked, something that made her unhappy. It was the result of my failure to make her happy. I suppressed my desire to cling to her and decided to accept the divorce. After that, she packed her things and left immediately, and I was left to live alone. "Another day well done," she would say with a smile every day. The days I took for granted now seem like a dream. Since then, I threw myself into work every day to forget her. The bar job was harder than I thought. The business hours were from evening till 5 a.m. Open 365 days a year, no days off. Besides the regular operations, there was a lot to do: making sales reports, training and cooking, submitting reports, attending meetings. There were days I had training from 9 a.m. after finishing work at 5 a.m. I hardly had any time to sleep. But the quietness of a home without my wife was unbearable, so the tough routine was just what I needed. I was totally engrossed in my work. "Max, this month our store's sales are in the top 5 nationwide," my colleague said. "Oh, is that so?" "Sales reflect customer satisfaction. It means we've really made them happy," I replied. "Yes, indeed. We've been getting a lot of praise from customers lately. Just the other day, I gave a customer some soda water to clean a sauce bowl on their clothes. It worked perfectly, and they were so pleased that they sent a thank you email to our store. "Your trick really worked wonders," my colleague shared. "That's great to hear," I said. I was recognized for my achievements and became the manager, working harder than ever. Then it happened. One morning, when I tried to get up, I found I couldn't stand. Suddenly, I was like a puppet with its strings cut, unable to move. After a while, I could slowly get up and managed to call a taxi to rush to the hospital. The doctor advised several months of rest. I was in a state of extreme exhaustion. Lying at home, I would see visions of my wife. "Are you okay? I've made some soup," she'd say. But she's not here anymore. Let me forget. Unable to bear being alone, I decided to visit my mom's house in the countryside when I could move a bit. My parents' home was originally a vegetable farm, now just my mom managing it modestly, selling produce in the town market. My dad had fallen ill a few years ago and had been in and out of the hospital. The scenery of my childhood home, where I lived until high school, was as tranquil as if time had stopped. It's been a while, returning home after so many years. My mom was still energetic as always. "You got laid off, then suddenly started working all night, and now a divorce. You're just worn out, both physically and mentally. You should rest up here for a while," she said. "Yeah, I will," I agreed. At home, I ate the fresh vegetables my mom grew and just slept, leading a simple life. The clear air in the countryside and delicious vegetables seemed to be healing my tired body and soul. After a while, feeling much better and energized, I went to the town supermarket. I had been relying on my mom for so long, I decided to cook for her, so I went shopping. Holding a shopping basket full of items, I lined up at the checkout and couldn't believe my eyes. Linda, my ex-wife, was working the cash register. What was Linda doing here? Her hair was longer and she looked thinner, but it was unmistakably Linda. I changed lines to avoid being seen and quickly paid, then went to sit in my car to think about what had just happened. Why is Linda here? Had she returned to her hometown? What happened to the person she said she loved? My mind was in chaos, in a state of panic. I couldn't just let this go. Eventually, I parked my car next to the employee entrance of the supermarket and decided to wait for her to come out and talk to her. Calling her wouldn't make her come out, and I couldn't just show up at her family's home. This store was closing in another 2 hours. I thought waiting and talking to her directly was the best option. Then, Linda passed by, pulling her bicycle. "Linda!" I shouted, jumping out of the car. Linda looked shocked, her eyes wide open. "Max, what are you doing here?" she asked, looking down, tears welling up in her eyes. "What am I doing? What about you?" She seemed restless as she spoke. "Do you have time tomorrow? I'll email you." "Okay, I'll wait for your message." Then, "See you tomorrow." With those words, she got on her bicycle and left. On my way home, I received an email from her, saying to meet at Amor, a cafe near the train station, at noon tomorrow. I spent a sleepless night and headed to the meeting place with my mind in a haze. As I opened the door at the cafe, Linda was already there. She looked tired, with swollen eyelids, maybe from a sleepless night too. I sat down in front of her and ordered a coffee, then quickly drank some water. My heart was pounding, seeing her after such a long time. There were so many things I wanted to ask, but I didn't know where to start. Linda was looking down all the time. There was a long silence. She was the first to break it. "I'm sorry. I couldn't find the words to reply." "Have you been well?" That was all I could muster. Then she suddenly covered her face with both hands and started crying. "How can I be okay? I had to leave you, whom I wanted to be with." "What are you talking about? You said you fell for someone else and wanted a divorce," I asked, confused, looking at her crying. Then she started to reveal something shocking. "I never told you, but I have a 3-year-old daughter from my previous marriage. My ex-husband started to believe I was cheating on him, got furious, and demanded a divorce unilaterally. No matter how much I denied it, he wouldn't believe me, and the verbal abuse and fights just increased. I couldn't take it anymore and agreed to the divorce. Of course, I wasn't allowed to see my daughter afterward. Then, out of the blue, I got a call. He was living with his mother, who was taking care of our daughter, but she passed away, and he got ill and said he couldn't take care of her anymore. I couldn't leave my child with him, but I also couldn't bring her to our home. So, I thought the only option was to divorce you and go back to my hometown to take care of her." Tears kept falling from her eyes. "I've been struggling every day, wondering what to do. I couldn't bother you with my problems, but I didn't want to leave you. There hasn't been a day I hadn't thought of you. It's my fault. I had something so important and got married. That's terrible," she said in a weak voice, crying aloud. I knew she had been divorced, but I didn't know about the child. I wished she hadn't kept it a secret, but knowing she had suffered alone all this time filled me with an overwhelming sense of heartache. "I'm sorry too, Linda. I was so wrapped up in my own issues that I didn't listen to your problems. Whether you have a child or not, my love for you doesn't change." I grasped her hand, holding a handkerchief, firmly with both of mine. "Dad, I've brought some vegetables with Grandma. Serve these pickles at the restaurant too," she said. "Oh, thanks. These cucumbers are really good," I replied. After that, I quit the bar I was working at, sold my house, and came back to my family home. Now, I'm living here with Linda and her child. Somehow, I've started being called Dad by her daughter, and it makes me feel a bit shy every time. Then, I opened a small bar in our town. The restaurant is famous for its healthy menu made with vegetables grown by my mom and is bustling with customers every day. "Honey, oh, Max, should we also serve this onion?" she asked. "Yeah, it's made with good fertilizer. Tastes great," I said. That's true. Linda is helping out at the restaurant too. My dad, who had been hospitalized, is now out of the hospital and comes to the restaurant for his rehabilitation. A few years ago, I never would have imagined returning to my hometown, opening a bar, living with my parents, Linda, and her child. There were many tough times, but they made me realize how happy I am now. Looking at everyone in the restaurant, I felt energized. All right, let's do our best today.